Hello, friends,
Hi.
and welcome to another episode of Next Level Love Stories,
hmm
where we get to take a behind the scenes look at real life relationships to share the truth about what this adventure of love can look like and what it really takes to succeed. We are your hosts. I'm Dr. Jenny Wallig.
And I'm Calvin O'Seely, and together we're the founders of Powerful Love Relationships and the creators of the Be the One method for creating extraordinary relationships. And today we're excited to welcome Lindsay Hack.
Lindsay is the CEO and coach of Hacktive Fit Coaching alongside her husband, Ben. Their business empowers driven, successful women to take control of their health with strategic, no nonsense fitness and health solutions that fit seamlessly into their busy lives.
Yeah.
Who couldn't use that,
Exactly.
right? Lindsay and Ben use the same discipline and efficiency that make them thrive in business to provide results without compromise, cutting through the noise to deliver sustainable, high-impact health strategies for powerhouse women. This powerhouse couple lives in Mexico with their two teenage daughters and have been together for over 20 years.
Wow.
And so
Congrats.
have an amazing story and a lot of wisdom to share. Thank you, Lindsay, for being here
Yeah, welcome.
and telling us about your success story.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. As I said to you earlier, I think love needs to be celebrated more than it is on a regular basis. And so I'm excited to be here to.
That's cool.
Well, then.
That was an unexpected.
Okay. See, it's excited to be here as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
the universe is like
My
Hey.
goodness.
celebrating.
Well,
Love, yes.
Yeah, excited to be here as they are, to be here as part of your guest. So I appreciate you having me.
Yes.
So cool.
Oh, so awesome. And if you're listening to this podcast instead of viewing it, Lindsay just had a couple of pictures on the wall behind her decide that they needed to both jump off the wall at the same time
Yeah, they were
as we're
very
celebrating
excited.
love.
Yeah, very excited. They're actually photos of a trip that Ben and I took on. So maybe they just want to be a part of the podcast with us. So,
Exactly.
Apropos. Yeah. So tell us more about what makes your love a next level love.
Well, it's pretty exciting story. I'm not going to lie. I'm Canadian. My husband is from England, and I decided to go traveling solo. Not something I ever planned on doing, just something that kind of pulled me in that direction. And within a month of traveling by myself, I met him, and I had just gotten out of a long-term high school / university relationship, was looking for nothing, fought it with every ounce of my being, and
Yes.
we could not stop staying away from each other. So my visa had expired when I got to the end of my year. I had a working holiday visa, and I was like, well, I'll go travel and, we'll come back and we'll kind of get together again. And he's like, no. So he quit his job, and we went traveling for another 2 years around the world and settled in Canada. But because he's from the UK and I'm from Canada, the immigration process was a bit of a pain in the butt. And so our immigration lawyer said, like, why don't you guys get married? And we're like, okay. But we did that and didn't tell anybody. So we officially celebrated our 20th anniversary 3 years ago, and finally told the world that we had been married before we actually had kind of a celebration with our friends that we, had as a wedding. So it's been quite an interesting kind of process journey. We've moved a lot with our family. We have 2 little girls who are now teenagers. We've lived in England, Canada, Australia, and now Mexico together. And so you can imagine there's been a lot, but it's, and we run our business together. So let's be honest, that's a lot. A lot.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Well, the first question I have, though, in listening to this, why did it take 20 years? I have to understand. What was happening?
So
20 years before you told people.
Yeah. So we did have a wedding, quote unquote wedding, about a year and a half after we got officially married at Civic Hall for our
Okay.
immigration. And so because we had a wedding and we had people come over from England and friends come from all around, and we got to celebrate and have an amazing time, we didn't really want to take that away from the people who got to celebrate with us. And so we told our children. They knew, as soon as they could kind of understand that, we celebrated in April, but we also celebrated in August. So it was, this experience for others to celebrate with us. And then I think when we hit that 20-year mark, not only was it, monumental because it's 20 years of marriage, we just kind of said, the people who might not think that was a good idea, it doesn't really matter because we just hit 20 years. Like, it's not really, the people who are like, ooh, should you really be getting married for immigration purposes? We kind of just were like, you know what? They've celebrated with us every year that we celebrated our wedding. So now they're going to celebrate. And it was hard to celebrate twice. So we just said, let's just go with our original date, which was in April 12th. And that's when we now celebrate. So we are 24 years this coming April. So we thought, why not shout it from the rooftops?
Yes.
Yeah.
And rightfully so.
Gosh, that's so good.
So it's clear that you and Ben have had a pretty instant connection, that you just kind of met while traveling, and despite your resistance, couldn't break away. What was it? What was it about that connection, or what you were experiencing in relationship with him that kept you going, even to the extent of continuing to travel with this man who you had just kind of met, and then marrying him after not that much time, really, and going through immigration, right? What were the dynamics?
Yeah, I don't really know. And it's interesting because, my kids, they ask us that all the time because, of course, they're now teenagers, getting into relationships and stuff. And they're like, so how, did you know, was the year so? And it's not so much that, the moment I saw him, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the man I'm going to marry. It was more of, we never really had the discussion beyond, well, I'm going to go travel. No, I'm going to quit my job. And then we never really had the discussion of, well, if you leave England now, you might never go back. Or once you leave England and we travel for the world, what does our life look like? Like, we never really had that big, moment of being like, well, let's discuss this. And then even when we finished our travels and we said, well, where should we, kind of go now? We kind of just decided Canada because he hadn't been there before. And, it was basically kind of sealing what we already knew, but had never really discussed. We never talked about getting engaged. We never talked about having kids. We never really had these monumental moments that people think relationships are built on, the movie's design. However, it was, very romantic and very amazing and all of those things. It's just not the same as, what the movie might tell you that, you have that spark and you just know. But I did, as I said, I was coming out of a long-term relationship. I wasn't planning on getting together with anybody. And we really just had a good time together. And that's how it started, right? Let's have a good time. I'm traveling. Why not have a good time? Get to know this guy. And then that turned into 8 months of me not wanting to leave the job I was at because he worked there. And then that turned into me being like, well, my visa's up. I really do have to leave now. And him not wanting to let me go. And so that was kind of how it happened. And then it was like, I'll go travel Europe. And he's like, well, I've done Europe. Can we go travel other parts of the world? And so we just started making plans. And that was the beauty of it. It was never his parents are constantly like, well, what made you decide to leave England? And it was never a plan like that. It just kind of happened, which I think is a big part of why things happen with us just continuously. We don't plan a lot. We just let it happen. And that's kind of part of who we are.
I love it.
I really do. Yeah, it's so good.
And one of the things I love about it is it's so almost countercultural, right? Where the expectation is that you're supposed to communicate about these big decisions.
Yeah.
You're supposed
to over communicate.
Right? Give a lot of time and energy to figuring it out and anticipating potential problems and really thinking it through and collaborating around is this the right decision for us, or thinking about it. And it sounds like the two of you were able to just go with the flow and choose whatever felt good next.
Yeah.
And trust.
I think that's exactly what it was like, because even like trying to decide where to go next, like we traveled for a long time, but it was never like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And it was always just like, well, what do we want to do now? What should we do now? And how should that
Mm,
go now? And, even when we got to Canada, where, it felt a little bit more serious or, conventional or whatever, it was like
mhm,
settling down, that kind of thing. It was never, this is how we have to do it. Now, I'm not
mm.
saying that communication isn't a massive piece of how we have been so successful for
Of course.
almost 24 years. Communication is probably the biggest piece for us. My mom used to always joke that we talked about talking about things. Like, we spend a lot of time talking, but not so much planning and making sure that it went against the conventional ways. It was just, we were happy and we enjoyed it. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's never always, rainbows and unicorns, but we had a lot of conversations about what we, wanted to see in our life, but not necessarily planned what that looked like. If you'd
Mm.
asked me 20 years ago, would I be in Mexico with my two teenage daughters and, running our business here, I would have been like, no, okay, maybe, I always say, like, never say never is kind of our motto in life, but it was not something that we had planned to do. And I think that was kind of our thing. We just kind of go with the flow.
Mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Um, it reminds me of how important it is to have those shared dreams.
Yeah.
Right? To like know the vision of what we want to experience, but then not attach to how it has to happen.
Mm-hmm. Or when.
Right. Or yeah, or when, or
Mm-hmm.
the exact details of it. Like, I think that there is such freedom in going with the flow and knowing, like, we want to travel, we want to live in a new place next, we want to, have this kind of life together. And 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 while there's some benefit sometimes to planning, Cal and I aren't much of planners either. So we really resonate with the go with the flow lifestyle. I think it's so lovely because now there's this opportunity for new opportunities and new ideas and surprises and delights along the way,
Right.
right?
Yeah, it's always, and I think that's, the thing. And it's funny because, for a while there, we definitely lived the very, American dream, white picket fence, two cars.
Sure.
He worked, I stayed at home with the kids, and it was weird. Like, it was just like, this is very strange, right? This is very strange considering how much traveling we had done. And I think, when I first kind of, gave the idea of like, I'm gonna retire you from corporate and we're gonna move to Mexico, he was like, yeah, okay, I see that happening. Right. And it was very much, even though it wasn't a plan, it was like, I'm the dreamer. I'm the one who was like, let's do this.
Mm,
And I just don't think he could see that far in advance originally. But then when we started getting closer and closer, then it was the people around us saying that we're crazy and how could you think about doing this? And, we've been here almost 7 years now, and
wow.
there's not a single thing that I would regret. Like, I've regretted from being here with our kids and the things that they've learned. And they're both, bilingual in Spanish and all the things that we wanted from them. But we're also now in a place where my oldest daughter graduates this year and life is about to change again. And we're just like, okay,
Mm,
what comes next? Let's have it. Tell us what's going to do. And we'll see how it goes. And that's has always been who I have been. And so it's just been really
mhm,
nice to kind of find a partner that is similar to me, because I think it would be really hard if I was like dreamy, 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 and he was like, nope, sorry, shut that door. So
mhm.
that's been really, really nice too. He's always up for the crazy that I'm interested in doing. And, he was like, do you want to move to Australia with a 1 and 3-year-old so for a new job? I was like, yeah, sure, let's go. Like, it was always just let's try it and see what happens. Cause what's
Yeah.
the worst it can do? And we stayed in Australia for a year. It was really, really hard. And then we came back to Canada. So it was like, what's the worst that happens? We try it.
Mhm,
It doesn't go so great. It was hard. And then we move back. So that's kind of
mhm,
how I look at a lot of things with life, is like,
mhm,
you can always change your mind. Like, what's the worst that
mhm.
can happen? So
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I write that down.
Yeah. What's the worst that can happen? Try anything twice. What?
yeah, exactly.
So tell us more, about what did it take to, you talk about like some of these pivotal moments, these hard places, um, and you throughout it, you've kind of, it sounds like, stayed really strong, connected, stayed really good at communicating all those things. But tell us more about the bumps, because as you also named, like it's not all smooth sailing. So what did it take for you both to get there?
I mean, I think being honest with each other is the biggest piece, and that plays so big into the communication, right? We're not playing games with each other. We're not trying to make somebody feel a certain way. And if I do feel a certain way, I let him know. And I mean, I'm very open and honest with my feelings, and so is he. So there are moments where you have, my kids always laugh because there are moments when we have very different opinions about things, and we're raising our voices, and they're like, "Why are you guys fighting?" And we're like, "We're not fighting. We're just having conversations, and it just happens to be leveled up a little bit." And I just think that you can't be afraid to not necessarily agree with everything that each one of us says. You can't be afraid to challenge that. I call him out on his BS just like he does to me, and man, does it not feel great sometimes, but I'm better for it, he's better for it. And I think that's the big thing, is that if you are not afraid to be vulnerable with your partner, if you're not afraid to say the hard things, then it's not always the easy way, the path of least resistance by any stretch of the imagination, but it provides you with learnings. And one of the things we've always said with our girls is that they need to understand that it's not perfect, first of all, that communication is so important, but also that we are able to get angry at each other and never be like, "Oh my gosh, I wonder if he's going to leave me," or "Oh my gosh, this is going to be the worst." And we have to show them how to do conflict resolution. We have to show them how to kind of go through this, because it's not perfect all the time, but we do very, very well to get through it and past it quite quickly, even if it means sometimes sucking up my stubbornness or his or whatever it is, because we're partners in this together. And years ago, before we ever had kids, we had friends who were older than us said, "You guys are the foundation, right? You guys are the most important piece, and then the kids will be good if you're the foundation." And we took that very much to heart, because it really does make a difference, right? If we're good, they're good. If we're not good, right? I come from a divorced family. I know what that looks like when they're not good. And so we've always just said, like, him and I are very, very important in our world, and then the girls come. And then because of that, we are a very strong family unit, because they see that and they understand that, and they know we don't have to be lovey-dovey all the time, and that we go through these different places, but we also know how to get back to what I would classify as our norm, which is communication and being okay with having those tough conversations.
Yeah.
You'd sound like you're gonna
Well, I was gonna ask. Well, your question might be better, but how did you arrive though at this sort of understanding, right? So because I was gonna ask, like, was this modeled to you, in your childhood? It sounds like no.
No.
But like, or was it? Yeah. What was it?
Yeah, how did you figure this out?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I think about who kind of I looked up to, from a family perspective, or from a parent perspective or a love perspective, it was always movies and TV shows for me, because I came from a broken home, right? So it was like, I would love to be, like, who's the boss, and like their parenting, like, things like that, where it was just like, wouldn't that be lovely? Now, as again, I grew up with a single mom. I have two sisters, like, so we were a good unit, but it wasn't demonstrating what love was like in that sense. And so when I met Ben, I had a lot of baggage. I'm not going to lie. I came with a lot of like, "Ooh, I don't like that," or "I don't do that," or "That's supposed to be normal. I don't know." And now his parents are still together 50 whatever years later. So, they definitely, showed him a lot. And then he had to help me learn those things, so from simple things like, I've never been a massive hugger and, an affection person, because that's not where I was when I was growing up. And that I had to learn. And, his love language is actually affection. So I've really had to pick up my game and try really hard to, not just because I love him and I want to, of course, but because that's also his love language. So we had to teach each other quite a bit when it came to that, what I wanted and what I thought I wanted, and then what he wanted and what he thought he wanted. And there was a lot of trial and error. I mean, as I said, when we were in our 20s, living in different countries and traveling, I mean, there was a lot of things, but there was also, if you've ever traveled with somebody, there's a lot of embarrassing things that happen when it comes to traveling. So like when you sit there and you're like, yeah, I'm obviously going to spend the rest of my life with you when that just happened, right? Like, so there's all of these pieces that kind of play with it. But yeah, it's definitely a learn, and it's not, the movies obviously not do it justice, because it's not just like, oh, it's beautiful and lovely and roses and unicorns. No, it does take a lot. And I had to be okay with understanding that I didn't know what I wanted, and the relationships I've been in the past, that's not who I was, and what did that look like? And so, there's a lot of learning curves at the beginning, and then as we got kids involved, and gosh, we all know what that's like, and then as you move from country to country, and so there's constantly challenges. And so as long as we're open and having those conversations and being like, no, you're being an idiot right now, Lindsay. I'm like, okay, right? Like, you have those conversations and being open and understanding that whatever is told to each other, it's not out of malice. It's out of like, this is what we need to do to get move forward and do better. So it's been an interesting kind of way. And as we grow up and the girls get, our teenagers are turning into young adults and that kind of stuff. It's exciting, but it's also scary to see all the things that are going on. So
yeah. I really appreciate that you're speaking to this, Lindsay, because I think it's so profound, this idea of teaching one another, right? Like, I think a lot of people don't realize that is an important part of relationship success, nobody actually comes into a relationship knowing exactly how
to love you best,
you best, how this is going to work best, like, because each partner is a different way of loving, a different way of interacting, and your partner is not going to read your mind. It's great you're not playing games, right? But like, when you have both the openness to be taught, to be a learner, right? And you're owning the responsibility to help your partner succeed, to help them learn what you need and help them understand how you're feeling and where your mind's at. And also the responsibility of figuring that out for yourself if you don't know. Right now, you're helping your relationship from the position of really being a team,
right,
and growing the potential that this particular union has based on who we are and the love we share and the life we want to create together. And that is just so beautiful and so powerful in creating a love that can continue to grow and expand, that can use each new challenge as an opportunity to learn more, to get even better, to come together and like be a team and figure out how we're going to do this, how we're going to make this work in a really like loving way that feels good for us both. And I'm helping you learn how to do that. Like,
it's amazing. And oftentimes people say, marriage is 50-50. And I don't agree with that, because there are times when I'm giving 80 and he's giving 20, or I'm giving 10 and he's taking 90. And, it's kind of this back and forth. And, there are very few times that we're both 100% where we need to be. Like, we're constantly doing this. And that can be with the kids from a parenting perspective. That can be, health perspective. That can be from life perspective. It doesn't matter, but we're always kind of giving and taking. And it actually seems to work out synergetically wise pretty good, that when I can't give more than 10%, he is able to give 90, or when I'm really frustrated with the kids and he's okay and nice and calm. And so we have that kind of really nice synergy when it comes to that. And again, that's a learned thing. I mean, we didn't just pop out having, teenagers, 20 years ago. We've learned along the way, but I think as long as you're open to understanding that I'm not able to give 100% all the time, and he's not able to give 100% all the time. And the reason we're a unit, like you said, is because we're able to kind of move back and forth between that 100%. And that's what makes us really strong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've talked about like the relationship with one another, and you've talked about being parents and figuring that out together. What we haven't talked about is also being business partners. What do you, you call that the trifecta
The
of
trifecta of your maximum human experience.
yes, like having a really successful relationship, being great parents, and having a successful business together. That's like
Well,
ultimate.
Yeah.
Um, so can you speak a little bit to like to that? Like, how does because you were saying before about the kids, like when you two are good, when you're solid, the kids are good. We know that shows up in business too,
Mhm.
right? Like how you are as a couple affects how you are as a business. Can you speak a little bit to like how you navigate that? The couple and the parent and the business partners?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could definitely get challenging. We've been business partners now full time for 7 years.
Okay.
And before that, I was running my business and he was working in the corporate world. So that has a whole other challenge. I'm never going to take that away from anybody who lives that life either. Um,
Mm.
but I'll tell you, one of the hard things for us originally was when he left the corporate world and we moved to Mexico. He'd been in the corporate world for 20 plus years. It was his identity. It was who he was. And so there was a lot of lost, like, wait, what? Like, what am I supposed to do here? And so, once we kind of got that, part, because, he's always wanted to be a part of the business, but financially and life wise, we just weren't able to do it. So,
Mhm.
the time that it took to kind of find our way when it came to business partners was probably a hard go, just because being a very high end corporate executive to now only, I guess, quote unquote, only running a business. I mean, it was a little bit of a challenge for him. But I think the big thing with us, again, because our communication is very, very good, we have to bring that into our business. Now, I would say, just like in parenting, just like in certain things, I may have a stronger opinion about something than he may have a stronger opinion about something. And so, when I think that what I said is right and when he thinks what he said is right, that's
Mhm.
really get a little bit more conflict. But again, because we're both open to that feedback. So if I'm like, no, I think we should do this, the feedback may be, well, are you just maybe just thinking that because it was your idea and not necessarily my idea? And I'll
Yeah.
be like, okay, probably. Right. And so we, again, because we're open to calling out on our own BS, and because we're open to, you're never saying something just to be, an asshole. You're saying it to be true. And like, we need to kind of discuss it. And I think that's been our kind of decision-making process for the business is we'll always discuss it. We won't discuss it when we're mad. We won't discuss it when we're pissed. We won't discuss it when we might be at an emotional elevation level, but
Yeah.
we'll always discuss it. And, sometimes it goes my way and sometimes it goes his way if we're in a kind of a standstill. And I think that's the other part of it, is that I don't sit there and have my tally marks and being like, I won that many times, you won that. Like, we don't sit like that. It's just, let's look at how this is best for the business. And then we'll move forward with that. And so it's been a learning curve for sure, over the last 7 years, but it's definitely been, so exciting to be able to be a part of it together and, get to see him out of the corporate world and into the business world and thrive. And so, yeah, it's been great. And as I said, not perfect, but it's definitely been a fun time to challenge, and who knows what's to come, but it's one of those things where we're always open. So.
I love that. Bringing the communication in and being open to the feedback like that it really is huge, and and that piece ties into all aspects of this trifecta, right? To both be willing to stand up and challenge your partner, even if it might create some waves, but also then be willing and able to receive that feedback and consider it, even if not at first, but then like check in with yourself, like, okay, where is this really coming from? Am I really needing to be insistent on this?
Right. And I think
Yeah.
too, when you have conversations and there isn't any malice in that, I cannot think of a time where, he said something to me that was like honestly trying to hurt me, right? Like trying to get you, and that flows into everything, right? So even if
Mhm.
I'm backing him as a parenting decision, meanwhile, in the back of my head, I was like, what is he doing? But I'm backing him because, as a standard, united front. but I'm never turning around to him and saying, that was, whatever, to give him feedback is positive versus being like, that's a really stupid thing, and not being angry or mean about it. And I think that's kind of the thing that we've, discovered as we kind of went through this whole process, being together for so long, and then getting into business, is that we've been very, very clear on, if you have nothing nice to say and it's not going to be, critical, it's not going to help, then you shut up about it. And, Ben runs as part of his mental health, and that is a very big piece of it. And there have been times where I've literally handed him shoes and I'm like, get out. And that's the extent of my, you need to go and think some things through and then come back before we have this conversation. So we've also put that kind of in place too, where it's like, you go have your bath, that's mine. Go have your bath and chill for a bit. You go for your run, that's his. And so then we can come back and have that conversation without having the emotions kind of flying high, because you can say things that you don't mean when you have those emotions. So we always have this like separation and then come back and have a conversation.
That's brilliant. Yeah. It's hard sometimes for couples to do that, because
so easy to slide right into the primal stuff.
And to want to like resolve it right now.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think it takes, you spoke kind of briefly about this assumption that there's no malice, that like this foundation that trusting that you are gonna, you're not trying to hurt one another, and you can and will revisit the conversation. And when you have those kind of two beliefs in place, right? That like this, it's going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. He's not my enemy. Then it becomes a lot easier to make that healthy decision of like taking a little bit of space to cool down so you can circle back.
Right. And I mean, you have a safe space with each other, right? I mean, we have friends who, they'll say something to their spouse and they will literally think that the spouse is going to leave them for whatever reason. And I that to me has never been something like, not once have I had that thought. Now, if you did, that would be a very different conversation to be having. But that's the thing with us. It's like the safe space is, no matter what I say, even if I do say something that probably wasn't the right thing to say in that moment. We've all been there, whether it's parenting or your relationships or whatever. We've always said we'll come back and have that conversation. And I always say I apologize to my kids on a regular basis, because I'm not perfect. I don't know how to be a parent to a teenager on a regular basis. And I apologize to my spouse on a regular basis, because we all mess up. But as long as we're open to having that conversation and being like, I am really sorry about that. I cannot believe I said that. That was my, and having that communication again, it's okay. And, when I say that to my kids, they understand, because we often say like, there's no handbook that says anything about parenting for you two specifically. So we're constantly having that conversation. And so, that safe space of, even if I do mess up, they're going to forgive me, and they're going to understand, and they're going to look at it from a very open perspective of like, I didn't mean to be cruel. And if I was, I'm sorry. And so we often are saying sorry to each other or opening that conversation up, because it is that safe spot.
Yeah, but I think the big thing that you're talking about in creating the safety too is a foundational thing that we teach as well, which is like accountability from an empowered place, right? That accountability, that acknowledging that like, look, I wasn't my best. I can see how I totally could have. If I could take it back, this is what I would have done differently, kind of thing, right? Like that really matters, and it really helps to ease any issue or discomfort that happened from the mistake that was made. And it sounds so basic, and it's absent from so many relationships.
Yeah. And I feel like that is, again, one of the big lessons that we try to teach our kids, because, like you say, it seems so basic, but I mean, it is such a big thing that people don't do. And I think, for me as a parent, saying I'm sorry to a 16-year-old, she's like, whoa, you're supposed to be, mom and perfect and whatever. I was like, no, I'm not even close to that. And I am okay to say I'm sorry. And I'm okay to say I should have done it this way, or what could I do differently? How would you like me to do it differently? And having that conversation, because I'm not a perfect wife. I'm not a perfect mother. I'm not a perfect human. And, I never expect any of my clients to be perfect. So we need to make sure that we give grace to ourselves for all of those pieces as well, which I think, we fail to do. We say, yes, we'll do it. And then we're super hard on ourselves. So we have to do both.
Yeah.
So good.
100%. And I think it's so much, it's so much more realistic and gracious to assume that we're going to make mistakes and
Yeah.
just trust that we can always learn and course correct and repair than try to be the kind of wife, mom, business owner, coach who never makes mistakes.
Right.
Right?
It's
Because that
impossible. You're never going to win at that one.
no,
Yeah.
right? We're gonna be constantly like failing and feeling crappy about
Yeah.
ourselves. So, and I love it when in relationships you can build that level of like safety and expectation that we're all human, we're all gonna make mistakes, we're all gonna cause pain or act out of alignment, not our best selves. It just happens as people in relationship with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, I'm still going to love you. And I'm going to trust that if I say I'm sorry and acknowledge it, like we're going to be able to repair.
Right.
And the other piece I just want to highlight that you're talking about, Lindsay, that's so important is that learner's attitude, like using those mistakes as an opportunity to learn.
Yeah. And that you're
How
always
could
learning.
I do it better?
Yep. You're always learning. You're always growing. You're always willing.
Yes.
Right.
And our children change, our partners change, our businesses change over time. So we're not ever done learning. We're going to learn this new stage, this new year, this new chapter, this new development.
Yeah.
And
I love that. I mean, I think that's part of the best part of life is that you're constantly learning and, trying. And I always say, like, Ben and I don't like learning the same things. He's big into certain things that I'm not and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the thought of never learning again, like that's the biggest fear. It's like, no, there's always something to learn. And I think it comes back to, like you say, when you're in a situation where you maybe not be at your best, and this is what we say to the kids all the time. It's like, where could you, don't worry about anyone else, but where could you have done, because we're very much like, well, he did this or she should have done that. And it's like, no,
Right.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. What about you? Where are you, at fault here? Or where could you, get better at this? And I think that's, a really big piece of that learn, because, if you're open to it, you're going to have a better relationship in any capacity.
100%. Yeah, that's actually the foundation of what we teach.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like speaking our language here, Lindsay. Like, yes.
Beach.
So, I mean, clearly you and Ben have figured a lot of stuff out. You keep learning, you keep leveling up. You're teaching it to your daughters, you're applying those strengths and skills in your business. Tell us a little bit more about how you're using all of that wisdom to support people in your business. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we kind of just discussed about being a learner and, having that open mindset. And these are all the things that, from a business perspective, as a coach, I'm an extreme believer in. And just like I said, I don't expect to be a perfect mother or wife, I don't expect clients to be perfect either. I mean, let's be honest, none of us are. And we don't have that even, unfortunately, we have a lot of perfectionists in our world who think that they need to be perfect, which is probably what holds them back. But, again, giving yourself grace and being in a situation where, you're always learning. And, I often say, like, if there's a situation where, you went to a party and you ended up having a lot more of the food that you weren't thinking you wanted to, and, you had all these negative thoughts go through your head and stuff, it's not a beat yourself up moment. It's a, okay, what could I have done differently moment? What can I do next time? Because there's always going to be a next time. So what are we doing next time to help us? And so I think all of that comes into when I'm coaching my clients, because, I really believe that everything that we do has a learn to it, right? Yes. Good, bad, or ugly. There's always a learn to it, right? And so it doesn't matter where they're at, as long as they're open and willing to learn from that mistake or that scenario or that celebration or that win, then they're always going to be able to move forward. It's the people that get stuck in that it's got to be perfect. I can't do this. It's if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not doing it at all. Those are the ones that get stuck. And so there's a lot of work to be done there. But overall, if you think you can learn, right? We say this to our kids all the time. We sometimes forget as adults this, but like, you know, your kid falls off the bike, you say, get back on again. You know, you kiss the boo-boo and you get back on again. But as human beings, it's like we fall off the bike. I'm like, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. It's like,
Yep.
no, just what did you learn from it? Let's keep going. Let's move forward. And
Mhm.
so, you know, from a coaching perspective, I think that's the biggest piece. You know, I coach on a lot of different areas, but as long as they're willing and open and to learn from whatever went on, then they're constantly moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to jump in, but I'm doing a lot of jumping
No,
in.
go ahead.
Did you? Okay. So we have one more question that we want to follow. Oh wait, no, we don't. We've got two more questions that we want to follow up with. But while we're on the subject of your business, how can people get a hold of you? Like what are some of the ways that you work with people? If they're like, I want to work with Lindsay, I want her to help me learn how to have that grace and learn from my journey so I can be my healthiest, best self. How would people start that process?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm Lindsay Hack Coaching pretty much across all social medias. Our website is hacktivefit.com. And so you can come on there and take a look at the different programs we have. I work one-on-one a lot with people because we are such a personalized, you know, we're not cookie cutter. We're very focused on, you know, how do we fit this, you know, whatever this is for you into your life versus, you know, let's try to fit your life into what I'm saying. No. So we're very personalized that way. But so one-on-one, I do group coaching as well. And then we do have like monthly kind of, we call it connection calls, or it's actually called Get Shit Done, excuse me, kind of community hour. So there's different ways to kind of get involved in that depending on, you know, timeline and all of that stuff. But I think the big thing is, you know, come connect with me somewhere because, I'm very passionate about what I do, if you haven't got that across already, but I'm very passionate about what I do. And I really, truly believe that it's just a small step, like a little tiny change that can absolutely change the direction of your life. And so we think there's always this, it's kind of going back to the love story way back when, we always think there's this big, massive thing that changes it. And it's not. And it's not at all. It's the tiny little steps that you make every day, you know, consistently along the way that it is. And oftentimes people say that's not enough. It doesn't feel like enough. And I'm like, I promise you it is. So, you know, if you're like, I'm not sure, just reach out. I love to talk to people. I love to answer questions. So I'm always available for that.
Awesome.
So cool.
Excellent. Thank you. And we will make sure to get those links in the show notes so that it can be really easy for anyone watching or listening to get in touch with you or learn more about you.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
All right. I'm going to hand it to you to jump into our last couple of questions.
Yeah. Let's hear, Lindsay, what is next? What is the next level love, ambition for you and Ben?
Well, it's such a big question. I'm in such an interesting phase of my life right now where my one daughter is talking about doing her gap year. My other daughter is, you know, like this is the big, I mean, it's funny because people are like, you guys moved to Mexico, you moved to Australia, like you've done all these crazy things. I'm like, this is like the biggest next phase for us because you know, being empty nesters, which I still feel is far enough away, but I think that is such an exciting time as well because, you know, Ben and I have so many plans to travel and things to do. You know, we have our business still to grow and, you know, we have our podcast and we have all these really exciting things to go on. But it is an unknown because, you know, my daughter's talking about going to Spain. You know, they want to use their Spanish to go to college over there. Like there's so many unknowns at the moment. I would say it's probably the first time where I'm like, I'm not really sure what the future holds. I know what we have planned long term in terms of, you know, building our business and growing and, you know, doing those things. But in terms of like where in the world we might be or what we're going to be doing with that, I don't know. And that is so weird. I mean, even as a non-planner where we're kind of like, let it flow. It's like, this is weird. It's not really my flow, you know? not really what I did. So yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see in the next little while, but definitely Hack to Fit, which is our coaching program. I mean, obviously our last name's Hack, so that's kind of where we played the part on that. We're doing some really great things. We're building. Our podcast is less than 6 months old, so it's building, and so we have some great things coming. And then of course, just the excitement of what's next, because some people get really freaked out about that, but for me, I'm excited about it. But I also, with the kids, potentially leaving, that's a big step as well. So there's a lot of excitement coming up, and I just don't know what that looks like yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're excited for you.
Yeah.
And given how the past unknowns have unfolded for you and Ben,
You got this.
we anticipate it's going to be fun adventures along the
that's
way.
it.
Lots of learning and growth.
I always say, I'm like, to the next adventure. Like that is something that I say to my clients, to the kids, to, ourselves all the time. And that's really it. Like, I'm happy to be a part of anybody's adventure. I have people often say, well, how do I move to Mexico? Or how do I do these things? And I'm like, let's talk adventure. I think it's amazing. And so I know that whatever comes next will be the ultimate adventure. And, that's what it's all about. And I think as long as we continue to have fun with it, then we're moving forward.
Yes.
I love it.
I love it. That's so good.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. What advice or words of wisdom do you have for people looking to create their own next level love?
I feel like just be open. Love is love. And because as I said, I love that I get to talk about this. I just think that we put this idea and this expectation, these we get influenced on what it should look like and how it should be. And sometimes that's walls, and that stops the greatness from coming in. And so I think, I think back to if I had very specifically said, I'm not getting into a relationship after my long relationship, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so I just think be open, and you have no idea what could happen. And I think, that gives me goosebumps, because I just think it's so beautiful that the reality is it could be anything that hits. It could be anyone that hits. It could be any, place in the world that hits. And so, just be open and just whatever comes, try it. And as I said, what's the worst that can happen? And, I know people who are listening are be like, oh, the heartbreak and this. I'm like, yeah, but that's all part of it. That's all part of it. I had heartbreak. Ben had heartbreak. We didn't come together, these perfect little, never heartbreak persons ever in the world. No, we all come with what we come with. And I think that's part of the best thing. And you never know what you don't want until you try it. So just be open and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for coming on the show and sharing your story and all of your wisdom.
Yeah.
It has been a really fun, a really rich conversation.
Lots of nuggets.
Yes, so much. And I have no doubt that our listeners are going to take away some really important lessons around creating their next level love. So thank you for helping to spread the love and inspire even better relationships.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for having me. As I said, I think it's underrated, and I definitely am all about talking more about it. So
yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. And thank you all for tuning in to this week's Next Level Love. We hope that you'll join us next week for another Next Level Love story. And please share your takeaways in the chat or in the comments. What did you learn about love today? Until next week.
Bye.